Satoru-kun is one of the most chilling urban legends in Japan, a spirit that can predict your future if you dare to invoke it. However, calling upon this spirit comes with a terrifying risk. Many claim that once you summon Satoru-kun, your life will never be the same. The legend is straightforward to invoke, but the consequences are far from simple. To call Satoru-kun, you need a public phone, a cell phone, and a question about your future that you desperately want answered. But here's the catch. If you make a mistake, the consequences could be far worse than you ever imagined. Hiroshi, a young man eager for answers, heard about the legend one winter night. His curiosity overpowered his fear, and he decided to test it for himself. At work, Hiroshi had been fighting for a promotion that he desperately wanted. He wondered whether Satoru-kun could give him the answer. With his cell phone in one hand and a few coins in his pocket, Hiroshi walked out of his home into the cold night. He found a deserted public phone booth on a street corner, the eerie glow of the streetlights casting long shadows around him. His heart pounded as he inserted the coins into the phone and dialed his own cell phone number. When his phone began to ring, he softly murmured the words 3 times. "Satoru-kun, if you are there, please answer me." He then hung up his cell phone and left the booth, a mix of excitement and fear swelling in his chest as he made his way back home. That night, the hours dragged by, each tick of the clock filling him with a growing sense of dread. Hiroshi was restless, jumping at every sound in his apartment. He lay in bed, unable to sleep, his mind filled with the possibilities of what he had just done. At exactly 3 o'clock, Hiroshi's phone rang. His breath caught in his throat as he answered the call, and a cold, distant voice spoke on the other end. "I am entering the train station now," the voice said. Hiroshi's heart almost stopped. He remembered that according to the legend, Satoru-kun would start announcing his location with each call, growing closer with every passing moment. The next call came soon after. "I am now on Central Avenue." Hiroshi's fear grew with each ring of the phone, the voice creeping ever nearer. "I am at the corner of your street." By the time the voice announced, "I am in front of your house," Hiroshi could hardly breathe. His hands shook as he held the phone, knowing that the decisive moment was approaching. He needed to ask his question, but fear clouded his mind, leaving him unable to think clearly. Then, the final call came. "I am at your door." Hiroshi knew he had to ask his question, but his mind was blank, his fear overwhelming. Desperately, he shouted the first question that came to mind. "Will I get the promotion?" A crushing silence followed, as if the world itself had stopped. Then the voice responded, "Yes, but at what cost?" Hiroshi felt a cold touch on his shoulder, and against all his instincts, he turned around. No one was there, but the chilling sensation remained. He had made a fatal mistake. In the days that followed, Hiroshi did receive the promotion he had so desperately wanted. But his life began to unravel. He started seeing shadows in his home, feeling unseen presences while he slept. Satoru-kun's voice whispered in his dreams, revealing dark secrets about the future things Hiroshi wished he had never known. The legend says that once you call Satoru-kun, he never truly leaves. The answer you seek will come, but the price is the constant presence of the spirit, who watches your every move, waiting for the next opportunity to take you. Hiroshi had gotten what he wanted, but he was now a prisoner to the spirit he had summoned. He became a shadow of himself, haunted by Satoru-kun, trapped in a nightmare he couldn't escape. The lesson of this legend is clear. Some questions are not worth asking. The price of knowing the future may be more than you can bear. So if you ever hear the legend of Satoru-kun, think twice before trying to call him. Some answers come at the cost of eternal fear. Now, onto a legend even more unsettling, the dream room. The dream room is a legend that haunts those who hear about it and warns of a horrifying fate for anyone who cannot forget it within a week. If you cannot erase the story from your mind, you will eventually dream of the room, and if you dream of it, you may never wake up. Kay was a curious teenager who first heard the legend from a classmate. At first, he dismissed it as just another story. But as the days passed, he couldn't shake the tale from his mind. The details seemed to linger, replaying over and over again in his thoughts, until he began to fear the night, worrying that he might dream about the room. A week later, the nightmare began. Kay found himself standing in front of an old, deserted school, shrouded in a thick, cold fog. Even though he knew it was a dream, everything felt disturbingly real. He walked into the school and realized that the hallways seemed endless, every door leading back to the entrance, trapping him in a loop of despair. No matter where he went, he always ended up back at the same spot. Fear began to take over, and then he heard the sound of glass breaking in the distance, followed by approaching footsteps. Kay's panic grew as he started running through the hallways, desperately trying to escape the unseen presence that was now hunting him. Eventually, he stumbled upon a clue near the entrance, a broken glass case with a plaque that read, "The key is in room 108. Kay knew he had to find this room to escape the nightmare. He sprinted down the corridors, finally finding room 108. Inside, the room was filled with backpacks and belongings, as if students had just been there. But the room was eerily empty. Frantically, he searched every bag, every corner of the room, but found nothing. As he left the room in despair, he was greeted by a gruesome sight. The hallway was now littered with the lifeless bodies of students, bloodied and motionless. Among them was a teacher, staring at Kay with hollow, empty eyes. Horror consumed him as he realized that he was trapped in the nightmare, just as the legend had foretold. The voices of the dead students whispered around him, telling him he would never leave. Time passed, days, weeks, even months in the dream, but Kay remained trapped, endlessly searching for an escape that didn't exist. His body in the real world fell into a deep coma, unresponsive, while his family sought the help of doctors and specialists who were baffled by his condition. No one could explain why Kay wouldn't wake up. The legend of the dream room is a deadly trap for those who cannot forget the story. If you hear it, do everything you can to erase it from your mind. Because if you dream of the room, you may never wake up, just like Kay. That concludes part 2 of the scariest urban legends of Japan. If you liked this episode, don't forget to leave a like and comment on which country's urban legends you'd like to hear about next. Thanks for watching, and take care. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart and will stay with you for a long time. Japanese folklore is filled with eerie and haunting tales, and the belief in spiritual planes adds an extra layer of fear. They believe in 3 spiritual realms. First, there is Yomi, a dark realm where the dead wander eternally. Then, there is our world, where the living try to live their lives in peace. But between these 2 worlds is an even more terrifying place, purgatory. Imagine dying and not accepting your death, remaining trapped in this dark limbo, unable to move on. Some of these spirits, consumed by an insatiable thirst for revenge, manage to escape from purgatory. They return to our world as Onryo, vengeful entities that know no mercy. These spirits are driven by deep hatred and will not rest until they find those they believe are responsible for their suffering. In Japan, the fear of Onryo is palpable. They say that if you cross paths with one and it fixes its gaze on you, it can mistake you for the person it seeks. And if that happens, you are marked to die. The Onryo's vengeance is relentless, and it will not stop until its twisted desire for justice is satisfied. Now, put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and cover yourself well with your blanket. Let's dive into the first legend. In Japan, there is a terrifying legend about a spirit named Tomonari-kun. It is said to be a child spirit that appears in the form of a doll's shadow. Tomonari-kun is invoked when 3 children gather in a circle and call for it. Those who ignore its invitation to play may end up facing a horrible fate. Here's a chilling story about Tomonari-kun. It was a cold and silent night when Sakura, a young worker, was returning home after a long day at work. The streets were deserted, and the only sound she heard was the echo of her footsteps. She always took the same path, passing through an empty park that, at night, took on a frightening atmosphere. As she approached the park, she saw 3 children sitting in a circle in the middle of the path. In the center of them, a dark shadow shaped like a doll floated mysteriously. Feeling a chill, Sakura tried to pass quickly, but one of the children, with a soft and disturbing voice, called out to her. "Hey, Tomonari wants to play with you." Frightened but trying to stay calm, Sakura replied, "Not today, children, maybe tomorrow." She continued on her way, trying to shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next day, still feeling uneasy from the previous night, Sakura decided to take a different route home. Her steps were quick, and she constantly looked over her shoulder, fearing she might encounter the children again. When she turned into a narrow, poorly lit alley, her heart raced. There they were, the 3 children, now with sinister smiles and eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Their presence felt more oppressive, and Sakura felt the air grow heavier around her. The same child who had spoken before now stared at her with a sinister smile. "You promised to play with Tomonari-kun today," he said. "You would come this way." Sakura felt a chill run down her spine. How did these children know where she would be? Terrified, she made up an excuse and ran away. Later, at home, Sakura tried to convince herself that it was all just a bad joke. But then, she heard giggles outside. Approaching the window, she saw the 3 children waving at her from outside. Her hands began to tremble. How did they know where she lived? With her heart pounding, Sakura opened the window and almost screamed, "What do you want?" The answer came quickly, with a coldness that made her blood freeze. "Tomonari-kun came to play with you. Since you couldn't go to him, look behind you." Slowly, Sakura turned, and what she saw made her heart stop. The shadow of Tomonari-kun's doll was there standing still, an oppressive presence that seemed to absorb all the light around it. Sakura's screams echoed into the silent night, but no one came to her aid. No one knew what happened to her that night. Days later, a man was walking through the same park and found the 3 children. In the center of them, there were now 2 shadows, one of a doll and another that seemed to be of a woman. The same child looked at the man and said, "Tomonari-kun wants to play with you." The legend says that if a child ever stops you on the street and asks if you want to play with Tomonari-kun, be very careful with your answer. The next shadow could be yours. In Japan, there is a forbidden legend known as the cow's head. They say that telling this story is so dangerous it can lead to disgrace or death. Those who dared to narrate the details of this legend faced terrible and inexplicable consequences. It all started one autumn morning when a teacher decided to take his students on a field trip. The class was bored during the long bus ride, and to pass the time, the teacher began telling horror stories. The children listened attentively, eager for some excitement. After a few stories, one of the more curious students asked, "Teacher, do you know any really scary stories?" The teacher hesitated for a moment. He knew a story, but he also knew it was dangerous. However, The children's insistence made him give in. "Do you want a really scary story? I'll tell you the legend of the cow's head," he said, not realizing what he was about to unleash. As he began the story, the atmosphere inside the bus changed dramatically. The children, who had been excited, began to feel a growing unease. A terrible headache overcame them, and soon moans and screams of pain filled the air. The teacher, as if possessed by an invisible force, could not stop talking. The details of the legend poured from his mouth uncontrollably. The children's eyes filled with tears, their hands pressed against their temples, as if trying to fend off an unbearable pain. The driver, distracted by the screams, lost control of the bus. The vehicle overturned, and in a terrible accident, everyone died instantly. When authorities arrived at the scene of the accident, they found a horrific sight. The bodies of the children and the teacher were scattered, and the deathly silence contrasted with the chaotic scene. None of the survivors could explain what had happened. The legend of the cow's head, it seemed, had claimed more victims. Years later, a group of curious students stumbled upon the same legend. Despite the warnings, they attempted to recount it once again. They, too, faced the chilling consequences, proving that some stories are not meant to be retold. The legend of the cow's head holds power beyond comprehension, and it remains one of Japan's most feared urban legends. These stories may be legends, but they leave an indelible mark on those who hear them. Would you dare to tell the cow's head tale, knowing the risk? Or would you be the next victim, trapped in a story too terrifying to escape? Stay tuned for more hair-raising stories as we continue our journey through Japan's most terrifying urban legends. Remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for the next spine-chilling episode.